In the Naruto series, there are a lot of awe-inspiring jutsu and mind-boggling transformations, ranging from the humble fireball, the amazing power of Tengai Shinsei, and the raw destructive might of the Eight Gates technique. And of course, in the scope of these hundreds of techniques, some will get left behind. But in my opinion, some concepts absolutely deserve more time in the light, becoming staples for the series and their respective users. Today I want to talk about a few of those underutilized concepts, discuss their implications in the series, and what the characters, had they continued to use them, could have eventually achieved through their awesome power. I'll be using statements from the series, entries from the databooks, and analogous techniques to craft theories about the speculative extent that could have been reached with them, had they just been given a little bit more time. So stick around for that. Let's start with something incredibly frustrating: Sage Mode, and more specifically, Frog Kata and Inorganic Reincarnation. Sage Mode is a transformation achieved when a user can perfectly balance natural energy and the components of their chakra in order to create Senjutsu chakra. This is a supremely potent energy that allows the user to achieve amazing feats of speed, strength, and ninjutsu. For the most part, the concepts of Sage Mode empowering the user in these ways persisted. Less and less so as the series went on, it's sort of becoming a background singer to Kurama Mode and Six Paths powers, but what bothers me is the unique qualities of the respective Sage Modes were completely forgotten, making this transformation just a stat multiplier and an excuse for the anime to make bigger and bigger explosions. Frog Kata is one such unique ability. This allows the user to manipulate natural energy around their body, creating an aura that can act as an extension of their limbs and attacks. Here it's important to note that natural energy is completely undetectable to all dojutsu, sensing, and abilities of the like, making this aura completely invisible to everyone except for fellow Sage Mode users. Utilizing this invisible aura, a user of Frog Kata can make an attack, and even if the opponent dodges, so long as they're within the range of the user's natural energy aura, the attack will still land. This is insane. There aren't any hand seals or movements that would make this maneuver predictable or even perceivable, even with the Sharingan. And given the speed and strength afforded to a Sage Mode user, it should make fighting one an impossible task in taijutsu battles. Remember that when Naruto fought the reanimated third Raikage, Naruto favored Sage Mode specifically for its speed and maneuverability over Kyuubi Chakra Mode, a form that was able to match the fourth Raikage's version 2 Lightning Release Chakra Mode. Sage Mode is incredibly underrated and unfortunately was overshadowed very quickly by Naruto learning and mastering the powers of his tailed beast. To speculate briefly on what Naruto could have achieved with this technique is pretty wild, because my theory is that with enough practice manipulating natural energy, I think he could have learned to mold and shape it to form what would be likened to the welcoming approach Thousand Arm Murder, the jutsu the monk from the Fire Temple utilized, Chiriku, where he summons a giant avatar of a Buddhist figure and pummels their opponents with disembodied strikes. These two techniques already have fundamental similarities that I think are close enough to link the two. Consider that the monks of the Fire Temple have a special chakra that requires intense focus and meditation to achieve, which sounds a lot like Senjutsu, especially when you consider the implications of the terminology Sage Mode. And monks, more than anybody, embody the idea of being sages. I'm not saying that the monks of the Fire Temple have Sage Mode, but it isn't impossible to consider that similar powers haven't been unlocked in the vast shinobi world. Let's move on before I talk for an hour about how broken the monks of the Fire Temple are. Inorganic Reincarnation was literally just once, and this breaks my power scaling heart, because it's so cool as a concept and is probably the thing I wish was more utilized most in the entire series. This should have become a staple for every single Sage Mode user and would have warped every single engagement in creative and dynamic ways. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Inorganic Reincarnation is a Sage Mode exclusive jutsu, and despite the databook stating that it's a Snake Sage Mode exclusive, I'd argue that since every user of Senjutsu interacts with natural energy in the environment, an ability that derives its fundamental basis in manipulating that same energy, like Inorganic Reincarnation, should in theory be accessible to each and every Sage user. This is purely speculative, of course, and let me know in the comments what you think. By manipulating the natural energy around them, a user can breathe life into inorganic substances and drastically alter their physical structures for both offensive or defensive purposes. This is ridiculously versatile, and if utilized correctly, can give the user complete battlefield control instantly. And that is just the most simple application of the jutsu. In theory, this jutsu can act upon clothing, water, fire, and perhaps even air, considering air is just a gas, which is technically a substance, therefore falling in line with the ability as stated to act upon. This means that beyond becoming what is effectively an avatar-esque bender, they could in theory remove the oxygen from an area and suffocate an opponent. Again, this is purely a theory and meant only to consider the extent of the technique based on the stated wording listed in the databooks and source material. Okay, let's move on to Curse Seal Level 2. We're going to be talking specifically about the Curse Seal of Heaven that Sasuke wielded and his utilization of it. The Curse Seal is effectively a limited Sage Mode, deriving an origin from the Jugo clan's Kekkei Genkai. The Jugo clan innately has an ability within their genetics to passively absorb natural energy, though without the ability to harness and combine it with their chakra to form Senjutsu, which causes their stated madness and instability. Orochimaru isolated these genes and utilized his own Senjutsu to stabilize the Kekkei Genkai, and apply these curse marks onto individuals he had planned to potentially use as future hosts for his own consciousness. Upon activation, the curse mark spreads across the user's body, generally on one half, and empowers them to great extents. This is just the first stage of the transformation, which can be progressed further by the use of a Mind Awakening pill, which forces the curse mark to further mutate and become the Curse Seal Stage 2. The curse mark in this stage changes the physical form of the user in unique and powerful ways, allowing them to control their physiology in creative manners, like Sasuke being able to make wings and other appendages. The transformation that the user undergoes seems to enhance specifically the aspect of the wielder that they favor. Like in Kimimara's case, he grows giant bone protrusions out of his back. In Kidomaru, grows extra arms and reveals a third eye, which perfectly complements his fighting style. Of course, being that it derives its power from natural energy and Senjutsu, it empowers the user to great heights. Sasuke is able to completely dominate Naruto while utilizing his version 1 chakra cloak, and turning the tide of the battle almost instantly. It had so much potential as a transformation for Sasuke, in the same manner that the chakra cloaks the Jinchuriki wielded did, progressing more the further the tailed beast is allowed to express itself. Progression to version 2 and Naruto's bony six-tailed cloak being key examples to consider. The same logic could have been applied to the curse mark in Sasuke's case specifically, allowing him to develop something that was entirely his own. I understand why the concept was dropped to allow Sasuke to focus more on the Mangekyo techniques, which were at the time more plot relevant, but it made Sasuke feel less and less like an individual with unique skills and more like a copy of every Uchiha or Otsutsuki that came before him. Even the concept for stacking buffs has already been shown, with Naruto mixing his Sage Mode with Kurama Mode and eventually Six-Path Sage Mode with Kurama Mode. Sasuke easily could have maintained his unique fighting style, a modest stat modifier, and sort of a trump card to bust out in times of desperation, while also utilizing his Rinnegan and Mangekyo powers instead of solely relying on those of the Mangekyo, making him feel like a more diverse fighter. Next up is Minato, with the Spiraling Flash, Super Round, Dance Howl Style 3. We'll call it Spiraling Flash for the remainder of the discussion, for the sake of my dignity. The Spiraling Flash is a jutsu that I think utilizes the Flying Thunder God technique to its maximum extent, and is exactly the jutsu that I think earned Minato the title of Konoha's Yellow Flash. With 6 marked kunai in hand, Minato throws him at an opponent, surrounding their position before rapidly teleporting between the kunai, striking me with a flurry of blows. While utilizing the technique, Minato has been shown to leave an afterimage behind in the form of a streaking yellow bolt of lightning. It is unknown and unlikely whether he is using any kind of nature transformation while utilizing this technique. Rather, the lightning is just for dramatic effect. The jutsu has very little use. In the manga, we only saw the startup before it was interrupted, and in a flashback in the anime, it was only shown briefly. Minato often utilizes this technique with a clone, swapping places with it to perform a Rasengan finishing move. This jutsu is only credited with the defeat of a platoon from Iwagakure, which is still impressive, but I think it is more emblematic of Minato's fighting style in general, when facing individuals he deems a serious threat, and of course against large groups. Minato's most legendary feat, beyond defeating Obito and repelling the Nine Tails, was the single-handed defeat of over 1,000 shinobi during the Third Great Ninja War, and I believe wholeheartedly that this was the jutsu that he utilized to do so. I can imagine Minato littering the battlefield with dozens if not hundreds of marked kunai and warping around the battlefield, instantly defeating hordes of shinobi, and what other jutsu would he have done so with? Now for a bit of speculation. Minato has been shown to learn extremely difficult techniques, from Impartial Sage Mode, Dead Demon Consuming Seal, and developing the Rasengan, and of course the Flying Thunder God technique. So it stands to reason that he could have, and probably should have, learned the Shuriken's Shadow Clone technique, and allowed himself to multiply the marked projectiles he had at his disposal to completely dominate a battlefield instantaneously. This is the only thing that I could think of to make Minato more proficient at what he's already good at, especially considering Hiruzen was more or less a mentor to him. All of the pieces sort of line up. I do know that Minato utilized this in the Lost Tower movie, but the plot centers around alternate timelines and really can't be considered canon material. I know that most movies are borderline canon or completely disregarded when discussing canon material, this movie is completely unsalvageable as far as plot relevance and power speculation. There are assuredly dozens more examples just as egregious as these of jutsu, transformations, and concepts in the Naruto series that definitely deserve more recognition, screen time, or utilization by their respective characters. I'll definitely explore these concepts in the future, and more speculative powers in general. For more content like this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thanks guys. Peace.